Good morning, everybody. Welcome. So great to see so many people tuning in this morning. We'll go ahead and get started in about 30 seconds or so. Hope everyone is having a fin-tastic start to this Thursday. All righty, we will go ahead and get started. Good morning, everybody. My name is Ashley, and I am coming to you live from a kayak, which is a type of a boat at Point Lobos State Natural Reserve. And I want to wish everybody a happy World Ocean Week. I hope everyone has taken some time to tune into other portscasts happening throughout the week, learning fascinating things about our coastline and our underwater world. Before we get started, a couple of housekeeping things. This is a Zoom webinar, which means that you can see and hear me, but I can't see and hear you all. So we're going to utilize those reaction buttons located on the bottom of your screen. So let's go ahead and practice using those reactions with how is everybody doing this morning? Seeing some thumbs up, some party poppers. Yeah, it's almost the weekend, maybe even almost the last day of school. Awesome. Love seeing all those reactions. Feel free to use those throughout our time together. And we also have the Q&A available. And so you can use it as a chat box because I'm going to be asking you questions throughout our time together. And I'll leave about the last 5 minutes or so to answer any questions that you have. And so you can either drop those in at the end when I call for any questions, or if you think of a question, you could drop it into the Q&A. I promise I'll get to as many of those questions as I can. So to get us started today, I'd love to pull up a map here to show you exactly where Point Lobos is. Because throughout the state, there are 280 California state parks. And let me find this map here. And probably all of you recognize this as the map of California. And that little blue dot located right in the middle of the state is where I am currently. The closest largest city to me right now is going to be Monterey. So if any of you have ever been to the Monterey Bay Aquarium or have heard of that aquarium, it would take about 20 minutes or so to drive there from Point Lobos. It would take about 2.5 hours or so to drive north to San Francisco. And depending on traffic, about 5 to 6 hours to get to Los Angeles. So really nestled right along the central coast. And I mentioned earlier how I am out here on the water sitting in a kayak. And I want to make sure that we are all ready for this kayaking adventure together. And so, if you were to hop on out onto the water in your own kayak, what sort of gear do you think you might need? Go ahead and share maybe with the person sitting next to you, or you can drop an idea in the Q&A. But what sort of gear or equipment do you think you need? in order to go kayaking. Seeing somebody say that we need a life vest. Yeah, definitely. That is the most important thing that we need whenever we are at or around the water. So whenever I'm out here in the kayak, I always make sure to put on my life jacket. Awesome. Let's see what other ideas we have. Ooh, a paddle. Yes, definitely need a paddle, as you can see right here. And what's really handy about this one is that it is attached to my kayak. And so if I were to drop it, it'll stay connected. And so I won't lose it. But yes, I definitely have a paddle. It's pretty calm out here on the water this morning. So I'm kind of just floating in one spot. Don't need to paddle around too much. Let's see. We also, of course, want to make sure that we are staying warm. So I have a couple of jackets on, and also sun's not shining super bright this morning, but always want to make sure we got our hat on. And I also have some water in case I get thirsty. So, and one more thing, probably the most obvious thing that we need is the kayak itself. Something for me to sit in. Otherwise, I'd be swimming in the water, which wouldn't be too terrible if I had a wetsuit on, but the water is very chilly. It's about 50 to 55 degrees Fahrenheit this time of year. And so pretty chilly. So sitting aboard this kayak, I'm staying actually pretty toasty this morning. But let me go ahead, flip the camera around here so that you can see the front of the kayak here. As you can see, we have that big state parks logo right on the front. And it's also bright green, which makes it super obvious to folks on land. And so now that we're pointed in this direction and we have all of the necessary gear for our kayaking adventure, I think we should go take a look around. So I'm going to start paddling us around. And as I'm doing that, I want you to make some observations. What are you all noticing as we are paddling around? And these observations, you can share them with somebody sitting next to you. Or if you have a piece of paper handy, these could be little, you could jot down quick words or do little drawings, whatever you like. But go ahead and make some observations. And as we start moving here, I'm going to stop talking so that you can take in the views of Point Lobos this morning. All righty. Let's go ahead and flip the camera back around here. And I hope you all enjoyed that little paddle around. And as we were paddling around, you probably noticed all of the water. We are, in fact, currently in the ocean. So if you were to taste this water, it would taste very salty. We also have all of the trees and the rocks along our shoreline. And then, if you were looking closely at the water, you probably notice all of this brown stuff floating on the surface of the water. And we're going to take a deeper dive into exactly what all of that stuff is in just a little bit. But before we do that, when we think about Point Lobos as a whole, it is really this story of protection. We are protecting not only the land, but the water here as well. And so go ahead and drop a reaction if you have heard of a marine protected area or an MPA before. Let's see, seeing lots of reactions. Love to see it. And so when we hear the word marine, what are some of the first things that comes to mind? What do you think about when you hear the word marine? Let's see. Water, yeah, definitely. Can also think about all of the animals that live in that water, even how people are using the ocean. And so think about how you might like to enjoy the ocean, but there are the Marines, who the branch of our military that help protect our country. We also have marine biologists, scientists who study the life out in the ocean. And there is still so much that we still don't know about our ocean. We even have submarines that help us explore these underwater worlds. But when we add those last two words, protected area, we have a place out in the ocean that is there to not only protect the animals that live there, but their habitats as well. So, to help us think about this a little bit more, I have my very special shell with me right here. And this little shell, it's currently empty. There's nothing inside of it at the moment. Maybe a snail or a hermit crab used to live in here. But we want to be able to keep this shell safe. And so I'm going to take this shell, going to put it in my little box right here, going to put a lid on it. And now this shell is protected from things like fishing, as well as from people who come and visit, from finding that really cool shell, sticking it in their pocket, and bringing it home with them. Everything that is found here at Point Lobos, with the exception of any trash, needs to stay right where you found it. Even though there is no fishing allowed here, people can still come and enjoy the waters. So you too can come kayaking here. Drop a reaction if you think you'd ever want to come kayaking here at Point Lobos. Seeing lots of hearts, definitely one of my absolutely favorite things to do working here at Point Lobos is being able to be out here on the water. And if we take it one step further, and you are feeling a little bit adventurous and you want to get a better look at what's going on underneath the surface of the water, you could go either snorkeling or scuba diving. Anybody feeling brave out there that might want to try scuba diving or snorkeling and explore underwater worlds? Awesome. And not only do I get to go kayaking, but California State Parks also has a scuba diving team, a scuba diving team. And so that I happen to be a part of. So I also, when I'm not on top of the water, I also get to go underneath the water and explore. And one of my favorite places to explore is our underwater forest. And before I introduce you to our underwater forest, I want us all for a moment to think about the forest that we have on land. Think about what makes up that forest, what sort of animals might live there, maybe even some of the activities that you might like to do in in a forest on land. Go ahead and share with somebody sitting next to you. What might you find in a forest on land? Let me go ahead and flip the camera back around here so I can point out the trees that we have along our shoreline, right above this cliff right here. And these are going to be our Monterey pine trees. And these pine trees are what makes up the bulk of this forest on land. And we can see lots of different types of animals in that forest, like deer and rabbits, owls, maybe the occasional bobcat or coyote. If I zoom in a little bit, might be able to see some people walking. And so this is a fantastic spot for getting views of not only forest, but also the coastline. So just like there is a forest on land, there is a forest underneath the surface of the water. And that's what we're going to be spending the rest of our time talking about together today. And so let me go ahead, get my paddle out of the way here and pull something up on board the kayak for us to take a look at. And we have this stuff right here. If you recognize what this is, on the count of three, go ahead and whisper what this is. One, two, three. If you said giant kelp or seaweed, go ahead and pat yourself on the back. Because this is in fact exactly what this is. And this is what makes up our underwater forest. So let's take, if we were to strap on our scuba suit and scuba tank and jump into the water and dive beneath the surface. Let me go ahead, pull up a photo here. Let's see. Here we go. So, underneath the surface of the water, we would see something that looks like this. And on a sunny day, when the water is really clear and calm. It's truly one of the most magical places out in the ocean. And the giant kelp itself, is what makes up the habitat for lots of different types of animals. But before we talk about those animals, we need to talk about the kelp itself. And so let's take a closer look here at the kelp itself. Okay. All right, so our kelp itself. Let's start off with this piece right here, or our blade of kelp. And if I had the magical power to take some of this kelp and pass it through the camera to each one of you, and you were able to feel it, what do you think its texture would be? What do you think this kelp would feel like? It probably saying that it feels very slimy, maybe slippery, maybe a little bit like rubber. Hang on, I think there's a water droplet or something going on with the camera here. I'm not sure exactly what's going on here, but that looks a little bit better. So if we take a closer look, it also has all of these ridges on it, giving it a bit of a bumpy texture. And in order for giant kelp to grow, it needs to get as much sunlight as possible. And so by having all of these ridges, it increases the amount of spots that's available for sunlight to reach it. So it can get all of the sunlight that it needs in order to grow. And let's talk a little bit about that slime, because sometimes when I pick up a piece of kelp, it's so slimy that it makes my fingers really slippery to the point where it's really hard for me to hold on to the paddle. But that slime is actually used in a lot of products that we use as humans on a fairly close to regular basis. So I have a question for all of you, and that is, how many of you, when you were getting ready for school today, brushed your teeth with toothpaste? How many of you used toothpaste? If you did, then you have used something with giant kelp in it. That's right. There is giant kelp found in our toothpaste. And if you like to have the sweet treat for dessert of ice cream, guess what? There is also kelp found in our ice cream. And so there's even another type of kelp called bowl kelp, like the animal, that people slice up into thin rings because it's hollow in the middle and eat it very similar to the way that we would eat pickles. So we use kelp in quite a few different ways. Let's get back to our kelp here itself. So we have our blades, and then coming off of those blades, we have these floats right here. And these little floats, They're filled with air, and these are what the kelp uses to keep those blades as close to the surface as possible, because that's where most of the sunlight is. So if you ever find yourself walking along a beach and you find some kelp that has washed up onto the sand, and you were to step on one of these or push it between your fingers, they would pop just like a balloon because they are filled with that air. Alrighty. So we have our blades, we have the floats, and now I have a mystery object for you all. And I'm going to hold up this mystery object, and I want you to think about what it reminds you of. Not exactly what it is, but what it reminds you of. So here we go. Here is this mystery object. What does this remind you of? Let's see. Remind somebody of a coconut. Awesome. If I hold it like this, sort of looks like a human heart, even a brain because of all of the waviness to it. It's also nearing lunchtime, so it kind of looks like dried ramen noodles a little bit. But before I tell you exactly what this is, let's go ahead and hop back out of the ocean, back into the forest right behind us here on land. Because those trees have roots that help to give the tree water and other nutrients, even helps support the tree. And let's hop back into the water, because this at one time was in the ocean. And even though this looks like roots, it doesn't act in the same way that the roots on land do. This is in fact called a hold fast. A hold fast. And this is what anchors the giant kelp to rocks on the sea floor. Let me go ahead, pull up a photo here of what it looks like in the water. Let's see. All right. So where the arrow is pointing, it's pointing to a larger version of a holdfast. And as you can see, they can get quite big. This one is pretty large, which makes me think that this kelp has been growing for quite some time. And because of there's lots of nooks and crannies, places for animals to hide within this holdfast. And if we're thinking about animals that call the kelp forest home, if you use your wonderful observational skills, you might be able to spot some other animals in this photo. Go ahead and share with somebody sitting next to you what animals you spot. If you spotted those sea stars or starfish, give somebody a star 5, or you could give yourself a star 5, because these are one of the many different types of animals that we find in a kelp forest. And there are animals that live right along the sea floor, like our sea stars. There are animals that live directly on the kelp itself, like snails. And then we have, of course, all of those different types of animals that are swimming throughout the kelp forest itself. So all of our types of fish and things like that. And now that we've got our thinking caps on for animals, I have a challenge for all of you. And that challenge is going to be, in a moment, I'm going to pull up a drawing of a kelp forest that highlights just a few of the different types of animals that we can find. And your challenge is, I'm going to give you about 30 seconds to try and find as many different kinds of animals as you can. And while you're trying to find them, I'm going to count as well. So let me go ahead, find this photo for us. All right, here we go. So your 30 seconds starts now. How many different types of animals can you find? Ten, nine, eight, seven, six, five, four, three, two, one, zero. Time is up. Go ahead and drop a reaction if you were able to find at least one animal. If you were able to find at least one animal. Awesome. Seeing quite a few reactions. Alrighty, drop another reaction if you were able to find 5 animals. If you're able to spot 5 animals. If you spotted 10 or more animals, go ahead and drop a reaction if you found 10 or more animals. Awesome. So when I was counting, I found 13 different types of animals. And this is just a very small sample because there are about 1,000 different types of animals that call the kelp forest home. And so we would need a lot longer than just 45 minutes to talk about every single animal that we found. But this is a nice representation of some of those animals. And I do want to highlight just a few of them here. Starting off with this animal right here, our leopard shark. Because sometimes sharks get a bad rep. Sometimes people can think that these sharks are scary, but we really need sharks in our ocean to keep it healthy. So when we see sharks, it is a sign that the ocean is doing well. Because a lot of these sharks are found at the top of their food chains. And so when we see them, it's a sign that all of the animals that make up lower parts of their food chains are doing well. And this particular leopard shark has their mouth on the underside of their face. Basically, like if our mouths were where our chins are on our own faces. And they have really small teeth that are perfect for sucking up any worms or clams, anything that is hidden along the sea floor. Alrighty. Let's take a look at some of the other animals in here. Some of these other animals, some of them were very easy to spot, but others require us to take a closer look, especially with this little sea slug right here. Pat yourself on the back if you were able to spot this one. This one's pretty challenging. And these sea slugs are very cool in that they'll munch on the tentacles of our sea anemones, which are basically upside down jellies that have tentacles with stinging cells. And when a sea slug happens to eat some of these tentacles, they can steal the stinging cells for themselves so that they can use it as their own defense, which I think is super cool. And these come in all sorts of colors. Some of them can be yellow. Some of them are spotted. Others kind of have like the red, orange, yellow, so they look kind of fiery. These are amazing creatures. And let's see what other animals we have here. We also have on our sea floor, we have these purple spiky animals, or our purple sea urchins. I'm going to go ahead and pull down this photo here because I have something that I like to show you. So we can take a closer look at our purple sea urchin. And we can see all of those spikes. And then right in the middle, we have this white thing. Any guesses as to what the white thing in the middle might be? It's coming out on the other side. Any guesses as to what those white things might be? These are the teeth of the urchin. And so this is what they use to munch on any giant kelp that they are able to find. And there is one final animal in the kelp forest that I want to share because it is one that helps to eat these purple sea urchins. And this particular animal happens to have lots of fur, another one of my personal favorite animals. And we see quite a few of them here at Point Lobos. And that is our sea otter. Let me go ahead and pull up a photo here. Let's see of our sea otter. Here we go. So our sea otter is helping to eat those urchins. And if we were to remove otters from the ocean, the number of urchins would start to increase. And if there were a lot of urchins, then what do you think would happen to all of the kelp? What do you think would happen? Do you think there'll be more or less kelp if there were a lot more urchins? There'd be a lot less kelp if there were a lot more urchins. And so we want to make sure that we are protecting our otters along with the ocean as a whole. And so I have one final question for all of you because I want to make sure to leave time for any questions that you all have. And that is, we are celebrating World Ocean Week. On Sunday, we have the official World Ocean Day. But we can take care of our ocean every day. And so, what can we do to help protect our ocean? What can we do to help protect our ocean? Feel free to drop some ideas into the Q&A. What can we do to help protect our ocean? So, when we are thinking about how we can protect our ocean, one of the easiest things we can do is to make sure that we are throwing our trash away in the appropriate spot, even doing beach cleanups. Let's see. Yeah, and also disposing of oil in the correct way. Yeah, save water, recycling. Along those lines, we can also reduce the amount of plastic that we are using. We can refuse things that have a lot of plastic, find alternatives like a reusable water bottle or reusable shopping bags. And we can continue learning about the ocean. There is so much still that we need to learn about the ocean. And when we are, um, sorry, I lost my train of thought. When we continue learning about the ocean, share what we are learning with each other, with your friends, with your families, because we can continue to spread the word. No matter where we live, we are all connected to the ocean. About every other breath that we take is thanks to the ocean. And so the ocean not only provides that oxygen that we need to breathe, it's also a spot where we can go for walks or explore tide pools, go kayaking or surfing. And so we want to continue taking care of the ocean, not just this week, but throughout every day. So, with that, we have a few minutes left. And so I want to see if there are any questions, anything that you are wondering about Point Lobos, about working for California State Parks. Are there any questions? You could go ahead and put those into the Q&A. And I love to spend the last few minutes answering any questions that you might have. Let's see. Ooh, there's a good question about how large is the MPA, and I I can't remember the exact size of it, but there are actually two different kinds of marine protected areas right off the coast of Point Lobos. We have our state marine reserve, which is the area closest to shore where there is no form of any fishing or any kind of take. And then just beyond that, in deeper waters, we have what's called a state marine conservation area. And that allows some types of fishing. And then on top of those two, we have an even larger marine protected area, the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary, which runs from about just north of San Francisco all the way down to Cambria, which is about a quarter of the California coast. All right, let's see. There are any other questions? Let's see. Ooh, a good question about what kind of colors does seaweed come in? Excellent question. And there are like three major categories of our seaweeds. We have our browns, our greens, and our reds. And so those are the three major groups. And one of my personal favorites is a type of algae called iridescent algae. And that when the sun shines on it in just the right way, it creates sort of like a rainbow, like a shimmering effect on it. And it's really beautiful. So I encourage you to look up photos of iridescent algae. All right, let's see. Ooh, good question. When was Point Lobos State Park established, or State Natural Reserve? It was created in 1933. 1933. So, oh, we're nearing about 100 years since it's been a state park. Let's see. Question, how long have I worked for the state? Excellent question. Um, I've been with state parks in some capacity for about 10 years now. And I've been here at Point Lobos for almost 2 years. All right, let's see. Question about how long can seaweed grow? That is a great question. So giant kelp itself is found in areas of the ocean where there is still enough sunlight. So the tallest that it can grow is about 175 feet. But the kelp here in this cove that I am right now, the water is between 20 to 30 feet deep. But it's probably the kelp itself is probably a little bit taller than that when we include how it's growing across the surface of the water. Alrighty, we'll do a couple more questions before we wrap up our time together. Let's see. Let's see. Ooh, a question. If seaweed breaks apart, can it grow back in the same spot? And if a blade were to break off, or maybe more of, let me pull some kelp back up here. Or if this stipe or stem breaks off, it can continue to grow. And giant kelp also really has a seasonal cycle of growth. So during this time of year, spring, summer, when we've been getting longer, sunnier days, the giant kelp really starts to grow super fast. It can grow up to 2 feet per day. And then come wintertime, when we start having those big storms come through, a lot of that kelp gets torn up. Some of it washes up onto the beaches, provides food or hiding spots for critters that live along the sandy beaches or along rocky shorelines. And some of it even drifts out to open ocean, where it can also provide protection for smaller fish and things like that that need hiding spots when there's not a lot of good hiding spots in the open ocean. All right, we'll do one final one final question. And there's a question about can you eat kelp just like it is if I were to pull some out of the water? And I haven't really tried it. Um, but going back to that bowl kelp, I have heard of people just like slicing it up right out of the water and eating it. But yeah, we definitely eat different types of seaweed, especially nori in sushi. So, with that, going to wrap up our time together by wishing you all again a happy World Ocean Week. Thank you for being interested in learning more about the ocean. We have another day and another podcast this afternoon. So I encourage you to continue learning, continue helping to protect our ocean. I hope you all have a great rest of your day, and I will see you all later. Thank you, everybody.